So I'd like to thank you all for joining me this evening. My name is Suzanne Bontempo. I am the program coordinator for Our Water, Our World. And tonight's program, Retain the Rain, is in partnership with the Russian River Watershed Association. Boy, tongue twister. Um, yes, so thank you for joining me. I'm going to go through slides for just a little under an hour, leaving time for your questions at the end. One moment. I'll be going through slides for just about an hour, leaving time for your questions at the end. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. I would prefer that over the chat, but if you have any comments, go ahead and put those in the chat if you'd like. Either way, I'll see them. We will start with an introduction to our program partners, and then I am going to talk a little bit about the benefits of rain retention for our gardens and for the environment. And then I'm going to, the majority of the program will be talking about rain catchment systems, different types, and some of the things to keep in mind when we're considering adding a rain catchment system to our garden. And then I'm going to speak briefly about how to install a rain garden and why the benefits of the rain garden, all the benefits that they have and why they're so amazing. And then I'm going to touch on considerations for increasing pervious surfaces around our properties. And then I'll also touch on some additional resources. So the Russian River Watershed Association is a coalition of 10 cities, counties, and special districts in the Russian River watershed that have come together to coordinate regional programs for clean water, habitat restoration, and watershed enhancement. So the association works to promote I'm so sorry. I just got a little tongue-tied. The association works to promote corporations and implementations of projects that protect watershed resources. Boy, so sorry. Um, the Russian River watershed is the collection of all the cities within this area that come together to help protect the watershed resources, restore fisheries, and improve water quality at reduced cost to the members, agencies, and communities they serve. Related to gardening, that means avoiding chemicals that can be washed off into the lawn and garden and into the storm drains by irrigation and rain. And then the Our Water, Our World program, which many of you are familiar with, is a clean water program with the goal of reducing pesticide pollutants that are toxic to our waterways. So it's a partnership between the water pollution prevention agencies, such as the Russian River Watershed Association, and retailers that sell pesticides. Our Water, Our World is designed to bring that awareness between the pesticides and water quality and provide eco-friendly pest management education and support. So you can find Our Water, Our World materials throughout the state of California and throughout Sonoma County. In most stores, you're going to find a rack, such as the one pictured on the right here, that has fact sheets that feature different pest management topics. You might also see a QR code poster to scan so that you can access those fact sheets and the Our Water, Our World website. And all that information you can access right there on your phone. And then you'll also notice that we place these little blue tags underneath eco-friendly products to highlight eco-friendly products so that you know that you're making a choice that is not going to pollute the waterways. For more information and to view the fact sheets, you can go to ourwaterourworld.org. So why do we care about the water? So we all live in a watershed. And remember, a watershed is an area of land that drains to a single body of water. So any of that water that is not absorbed is going to move across that land and end up funneling its way to another body of water. So when this water is moving, it is going to in urban environments go untreated into local storm drains, moving untreated to the nearest waterway, or by passing through a storm drain and flowing directly to the creek, taking with it chemicals, pet waste, motor oil, debris, whatever else is out there in the environment. It can also bypass storm drains and just end up in our local seasonal creeks. There's so many around the county. So either way, water that's moving across the properties are going to end up in the waterways at some point. So we just want to be aware of our urban runoff and use eco-friendly choices whenever possible and keep as much water on site to prevent the runoff and the potential for polluting our waterways. And retaining the rain is a solution. So during the times of drought or periods of extreme heat, even during times of excessive rains that we've been experiencing throughout these years, it's challenging to keep our gardens happy. So we can learn how to hold onto more rainwater, not only by reducing runoff, but this also assists with our goal of growing resilient gardens here in our California summer dry climate. There are just so many benefits. So when we can keep water on site, instead of letting it run off into the storm drain or going into a local seasonal creek, we are not only preventing pollutants that get into those waterways and into the Russian River, but we're also benefiting our home and our gardens. We're preventing flooding, and we're preventing any pollutants that can then get swept away with that runoff. We can also keep in mind that holding on to rainwater, keeping that rainwater on our properties replenishes the water in the soil and recharges the garden soil deeper down, even recharging our groundwater and the lower lying aquifers. When we can capture rainwater, we are reducing the need to use the municipal water source to irrigate our plants and our landscapes. And then, and when we're doing this, we're actually saving a lot of money, and we're actually using free water. So in today's webinar, I'm going to cover some simple practices for retaining the rain. I won't have a lot of detailed instructions. It's really just an introduction. But as I shared, I prepared some resources for you that you can review and find that in your email box. So let's compare what happens when it rains in a vegetative area compared to an urban area. So in nature or more vegetative area, approximately 50% of the rainwater gets to soak into the soil, whereas in a developed urban area, it's just approximately about 15%. So how deeply the water can be absorbed into the ground is also important. So in this illustration, we see that about 25% of the rainwater in vegetative areas is available to plant roots for recharging creeks and so forth, while the remaining 25% of that water is sinking much deeper. And that deep infiltration is the water that's recharging the lower lying aquifers and recharging our groundwater. In urban areas, there's less pervious surfaces, so mostly impervious, such as the concrete, the asphalt, and so forth. And then with more rainwater to run off instead of soaking into that soil or soaking into that natural ground. So the illustration here shows that about 55% of that water is actually just going to run off. So what happens to that 55% of rainwater that becomes runoff? It's going to flow into storm drains, and along the way to the storm drain, it's going to be picking up pollutants from the street and the sidewalks. It can also be moving towards the seasonal creeks, also picking up those pollutants. And from the storm drain, that pollutant, that storm drain that is taking all that water to, in some cases, the Russian River or another larger body of water. And those pollutants are going to end up in that larger body of water, the creeks, the wetlands, the river, and the ocean, because there's no treatment or filtration system for this water for this urban runoff. And when storm drains, something else that can happen is that when we get significant rains, there might be leaves and litter that actually clog those storm drains, and they end up getting blocked. When we have these significant downpours, the storm drains get overwhelmed, and then we start to see flooding, which I think many of us are familiar with throughout the county. I certainly see it where I live. I'm on the west side, and it doesn't take much, good a few inches of rain, and we could pretty much be sure that the area is going to be, many of the roads are going to be flooded. And then keeping in mind, as we all are familiar, is that water is a powerful source that can displace soil and cause foundation and structural damage. So even if rainwater stays on our property, it can lead to eroding foundations if it's not directed properly, as in this photo. So let's look at how we can hold on to that rainwater, how we can retain the rain, keep that rainwater on site. The more that we can hold on to in a way that's really, productive and effective and efficient, is just going to give us so many added benefits. So one way to reduce runoff is to hold on to. Um, we want to help the soil hold on and retain more water. Which might seem silly. My soil right now is super waterlogged, and it seems like, why would I want to hold on to more water? But when we're able to hold on to more water, when we can increase the retention rate of the soil, when we can actually um, hold on to more, there's more capacity for that soil to be more like a sponge to really hold onto the water, then we're going to see less pooling, less flooding, and more water will be available to our plants for a longer period of time. So the two best ways to do this is by adding compost to the soil and to top dress with mulch to protect that soil with a nice 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch. Keep in mind that compost is the key factor that helps turn our soil into a sponge, allowing that soil to retain more water, more moisture. When we can amend the soil with just 5% of compost, this quadruples the soil's water holding capacity. And then, as I mentioned, when we can protect that soil or cover the soil, especially around the root zones of plants, with a good 2 to 3 inches of mulch, this significantly is going to reduce the water's evaporation rate. It's going to lock in that moisture for a longer period of time. It's going to feed the soil as it breaks down. It's going to insulate the soil and those root zones, and it's also going to reduce erosion. So there's a lot of really important factors there. Next, we're going to talk about rain catchment systems. So as I shared, this is the bulk of the program, so we're going to be here for a minute. Rain catchment systems can be large or small, they can be high-tech or quite simple, and they can be used for different purposes. So some will capture the rainwater from the roof, and then so that we can use it over the course of the winter to keep that soil spongy and hydrated. And some systems are meant to store that rainwater to use and irrigate plants during the dry season. The benefits of capturing rainwater is to keep relatively clean water out of the storm drains, from flowing and maybe flooding creeks and so forth. We're going to reduce that volume and peak flow during heavy rains, so that we can reduce that flooding. And then we're also going to keep in mind that when we can hold on to rainwater, we're reducing the potable water usage for non-potable applications like watering plants. So we can then take advantage of watering our plants or irrigating our plants with the rainwater we captured, as opposed to tapping into the municipal water source. Some catchment systems can be quite large. These tanks, for instance, are going to be at that 500 or more gallon size. And the main purpose of these is really to store water during the drier months to use at a later time. I think these are really cool. These are even a little larger. They're, large tanks like this can be 1,000 to 2,000 gallons. This system, this company makes these tanks to be narrow to fit along a fence line or the side of the house. There's even catchment systems or tanks that can actually fit under a deck, which is kind of cool. And there are some tanks that can also be stored below ground. Smaller rain barrels that we commonly see are typically around that 50, 55 gallon, even 60 gallon size. These are great for storing water, but they're also really good for catch and release. And what we mean by that is that during a rain event, these barrels will fill up very quickly. And then after about a week or so of when the soil has dried out, if we have not received more rain, then we can release this water to recharge that soil again, taking advantage of that soil's spongy capacity to store the water. So, keep in mind that we live in a summer dry climate with the intention of having a wet winter season. And so, if we are having a drier than anticipated season, that is where this catch and release is going to come into play, where we can then keep that soil really nicely hydrated during the rainy season when we're not getting as much rain as we'd like. Here's an example of it, even a simpler system. My colleague doesn't have an external gutter coming from her apartment, so she uses whatever container she can to capture as much water as possible. And then she, has these little buckets and the dish tray, and she's going to fill her larger bin that she's converted into. It has a spigot at the bottom, and then she uses that water over the next few weeks or months to then water the plants in the garden to keep that soil hydrated. She also uses it to water veggie starts, any potted plants she has indoors or outdoors. And depending on your space, multiple barrels can be linked or daisy chained together. So in this case, the rainwater fills the barrel from one downspout inlet and then has a spigot to drain the water out at the other end. And these barrels are all linked together as one. As one fills up, it then the overflow will fill the next one. And this is a really great economical way to start small and add tanks as you need to expand. A few considerations for deciding where we'd want to put a catchment system. Something to think about is, does your roof area drain to a downspout? If the roof area drains to a downspout, well, that's very easy. You've got most of the system in place already. The other thing to consider is, do you have a landscaped area close to where you want to release the water? So in most cases, we want to use this water to irrigate the garden. So we want to make sure it's in close proximity, close enough that we can actually access the garden. And again, remember, this is not potable water. It is, or nor is it intended to be reused as drinking water. So this is something I just want to be really clear about. This is really intended for us to be using around the landscapes. We're going to look at our local agencies. You can look at your city and the county for information on permit requirements and different type of zoning nuances. When we go to install a system, we want to make sure it's on a flat area that is ideally shaded from like a fence line or maybe a structure or the side of the house. We need a space we will then also need space to direct any overflow from that tank. maybe to a drain or a rain garden or an area of the property that can handle significant flow. If we have a large rain event coming in, it must be directed away from a home, a structure, that cistern or barrel itself. We always want to make sure the water is moving away from it, and especially we want to make sure it's not directed towards a neighboring property, because we don't want to cause any problem to our neighbors either. We want to ensure the overflow pipe has a screen at the end to prevent insects, birds, or rodents from entering, or any other critters. And then you'll need to secure the barrels or the cistern for safety. So, one easy way is just to strap them with metal straps directly to that support wall or fence or similar. And some considerations to think about when choosing the size of your system is, first, we want to think about our water needs. So, if you have a small container garden, then maybe you don't need to capture a lot of water. Or do you have a large landscape and really you can't capture enough? Like, there's a full spectrum here. So, perhaps there's other uses around the home or the property that you'd want to use this water for, such as maybe washing your car or flushing the toilet. So, these are all things to keep in mind. Next, what size can you accommodate? How much space do you have? This will be most likely the determining factor in deciding what system we can actually would work best for you, but also consider how much roof space you might be able to drain water from. So, what we're always looking at is how much water is going to be running off that roof and how much can we capture. And it doesn't necessarily only have to be the roof of your house. It could be a shed. It could be also like a chicken coop, any other structure on the property. Really any flat surface we see is an opportunity to capture water. On a couple slides from now, I'll be giving you an equation to figure that out so we can see, square footage to inches, how much water we can capture. But also remember, that not the entire roof might be draining to the system. It might also just be a section of the roof. So that's something else to keep in mind. And of course, how much rain is anticipated. So, this hasn't been as easy lately in our California climate. Things have really changed. But, you know, um, but there, we can expect to get, several inches each winter, we hope, up to 30 or so. But another important consideration when we're looking at sizing our tanks and our barrels is to consider the level surface. And remember that the water, these systems, these barrels can get quite heavy. So even if you just have a 55 or 60-gallon barrel, when that's full, that's like 440 or 480 pounds. So that's pretty heavy. That's a lot of weight. So a stable foundation is necessary. So for those smaller barrels, flagstone or cinder blocks, or even level gravel bed is good to, set it on. However, if you have a larger system like these larger tanks or cisterns, you want to make sure that it's on a concrete foundation or a slab so that it can really be secure and that they are strapped so that they don't get damaged or fall over during an earthquake or similar. And then I mentioned overflow. So a couple points I want to share about overflow is, depending on the size of your cistern or your tank, you will most likely have some overflow if we have significant rains or a large storm that really brings a lot of water. So you want to be able to release that water in a way that can flow into the garden safely and effectively. You want to have an area that can absorb that extra overflow water. We want to be able to have it get guided towards, like, perhaps a rain garden or a swale or a section of the landscape, where it will not cause any flooding. We certainly want to make sure it's moving away from your foundation, from your structure, and any other structures on the property. And as I mentioned before, and also away from the neighbors. We don't want to cause any problems at the neighbors and their structures. So in this picture, you'll see that the pipe, there is a wide overflow pipe that's coming from the overflow from the top of the tank, and then it is connected to this perforated pipe. And when the barrel gets full, the overflow water then gets diverted into the backyard, delivering water to an area of the garden that is slightly sloped away from the tank, slightly sloped away from the house and other structures, and then can actually just seep into the ground. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So what size barrel is needed? All right, so we're going to do a little bit of math here, so stick with me. I'm hoping it will be clear, but sometimes I start to get ahead of myself. So let's look at this equation. So the equation I like to use, it's here on the screen. It's 1 inch of rain over 100 square foot surface, such as a section of your roof, will capture 60 gallons of water. So that 60 gallons of water is the amount that is going to fill one of those two tanks. So it's a 60-gallon tank right there. So very convenient. So now we're going to think about how much water we can anticipate. So we'll look at the past several years. And for Sonoma County, for our example here, the average is about 30 inches, give or take. However, a few years ago, I believe we had a very dry winter, one of our driest, and I think we only got 8 inches that year. So, like I said, there's going to be some fluctuation. But now let's just say for math's sake, we get 10 inches of rain. And if we had one of these 60-gallon barrels, it would fill up 10 times. So that's capturing 600 gallons of water. So that's a lot. And that's just from 100 square feet. And your roof is probably a lot larger. Maybe it's about 500 square feet or even larger. And so with a larger surface like that, you could be capturing, in this case, 3,000 gallons of water. And that's just in the 10 inches of rain. So what I'm sharing is that we can really actually get a lot of water from not a lot of rain, which is really the big benefit here. Okay, so in this view from above, you can see that the gutter sort of funnels that rainwater into the pipe that goes into the first tank. So these tanks are linked together so that the first one gets filled and then the overflow goes to the next and then the next, okay? So to see how many barrels we could fill, first we want to measure the section of the roof that is actually going to be draining into those rain barrels. So using this example, the section of the roof that, we're using is going to be 250 square feet. We've determined that 1 inch of rain over 100 square feet surface can capture 60 gallons of water. This 250 square foot section of roof can now capture 150 gallons of water with 1 inch of rainfall. So that's going to fill all 3 of these 50-gallon barrels. Pretty neat. So I'm not going to go too much into the design and installation. And of course, we can follow up with the resources that I've sent. But for smaller barrels or containers, you can get kits that are not very expensive. They're fairly easy to install yourself. They will have the diverter and the overflow pipe and the spigot. So it'll be all you need to get yourself started with either a barrel or garbage bin or something similar. And then for larger catchment systems, it's really best to hire a professional so they can install it properly. Make sure that it's safe and sound and secured. Couple of things to keep in mind. When we have these systems, there's something that's called a first flush device. If there hasn't been rain recently, so oftentimes throughout the summer months, the roofs might have some debris on them, some leaves and dirt and so forth. So even though we're not drinking this water, we don't want all of that debris to get into our barrel or our rain catchment system. So it's important to install what is called a first flush device. This device diverts the first few gallons of water, rainwater off the roof into a separate pipe. Within that pipe, there is a ball that floats up or something similar to the ball, but let's say it's a ball that floats up. And once it's filled, then the clean water, it'll plug that overflow pipe, and the clean water will then go straight to the barrel. And then after we've had the first flush, we're then able to remove the screw or the fitting at the bottom to clean out the device and then to secure it again. And then depending if we had another dry period or not, we might see that there's going to be more debris that is built up in that. So we're going to want to clean that out, open it up and clean it out again, and as needed. One very important aspect to keep in mind is that we are not trying to breed mosquitoes. And we absolutely want to make sure we're keeping all critters and anything else out of these barrels. So for the large systems, they typically are going to come with a screen on the top, as in this picture on the left. It's going to fit really tight onto the the barrel or the cistern, and you can see that there could be some debris that builds up on the top that you can clean out. You can clean that screen um, accordingly when it needs to get when you check it, when you provide your maintenance. And then for smaller DIY systems or smaller barrel systems, sometimes they don't come with a screen, so we can just use some nylon mesh or similar that can get tightly secured over the top to keep the dirt, the mosquitoes, and other critters out. Make sure that the overflow pipe has a little screen on it as well. Remember that perforated pipe we saw a couple slides ago? We want to make sure that the end of that has a screen on it to prevent anything from crawling up into it. Okay. And then every so often, you probably want to take that perforated pipe and kind of try to shake it out or move any water that might be pooling in there. Just because, again, we don't want to have any pooling water that might attract mosquitoes. They're very good at getting into tiny spaces. And just a quick note on how to access your water. It's easy. It's easiest if your system is kind of elevated, it's slightly above the grade or like uphill or raised somehow from the garden or landscape, because we really want to use gravity to let the water flow, to be able to access that water, to flow it into a watering can or to water the landscape directly. For larger systems, sometimes we might want to consider using a motorized pump to help move that water a little faster. Yeah. All right. So that was it about the rain catchment systems. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about rain gardens, which is really one of my most favorite things. I love creating rain gardens and uh, using the plants and the landscape, the land, kind of sculpting the land in a way that can actually help move water where I'd like it to go. So a rain garden is a landscaped area designed to receive rainwater or maybe to receive the overflow from that rain catchment system. Any water that might be flowing over a roof or maybe a patio area or sidewalks or other paved impervious surfaces. And it's going to help that water to really absorb into the ground, to really kind of stay there and move deeper to recharge that water, that soil deeper down. So a rain garden is designed to receive the overflow from the rain barrel and other areas of rainwater flow. Rain garden allows that water to stay on site instead of running off into the storm drain or local creeks. And the goal of the rain garden is really to slow that water, spread that water, and allow that water to sink down. Rain garden is a low impact solution that provides many benefits. So rain gardens are beautiful, relatively easy to install, relatively inexpensive, and they support our pollinators, our beneficial insects. They moderate temperatures, and they also assist with carbon sequestration. They do so much to help us out. In this illustration, we can see that the rain garden is set about 10 feet from the home to receive the overflow from that rain barrel. A rain garden uh, is really just like any other garden bed, but what makes it unique is that it has a slight depressed surface. So you can imagine instead of a raised garden berm or a raised garden mound, think of this in reverse. So it's really just a shallow basin. It is not a pond, it is just a very shallow basin that is lined with rocks on one side, especially where the rainwater is expected to enter. This will help prevent with erosion. Uh, we can also fill the edges. We can line the edges with rocks or gravel. Um, we might also see rock or gravel lined swales that will also, which are designed to channel water or to move water um, where it originates, like such as a downspout or a rainwater tank overflow, and direct it somewhere else in the garden where it can get absorbed. I usually like to direct water either to like a hedgerow or maybe a hedge of evergreens, or where I've got some fruit trees or any other deeply rooted trees or shrubs. I like to kind of direct the water so it can sit not at the crown, but around the drip line of those plants so that it can really absorb deep into the soil to nourish and hydrate those root zones deeper down, and then, of course, recharge the groundwater. Rain garden's purpose is to hold water that's diverted to it so that water can slow its flow and soak in. So much of this water is used by the plants, which is the benefit. So, especially if we're planting plant material that thrives in our summer dry climate, such as California natives, those plants are able to get everything they need with uh, that is being hydrated. They can get well hydrated during the winter months, during the rainy season, and so that they can really get through the dry season with ease. So, if there is too much water, like if we have that rain garden and it gets overflowed, well, then it's just going to spill over and flow into the other areas of the garden where it would have if we didn't have that rain garden installed. A rain garden should drain within 12 to 24 hours and definitely no longer than 2 or 3 days. Because if we've got standing water for 2 or 3 days, not only are we going to be breeding mosquitoes, but there's going to be other issues that will come with long-term pooling water that will not be to the benefit of our plants. There's many ways to incorporate a rain garden into the landscape. They're feasible for most properties, large or small, and your plants really do reap the rewards. It can be as simple as diverting rainwater from a gutter downspout out to a garden, such as in this photograph. The rocks are there at the opening of the downspout extension to help direct and slow the flow towards where the rain garden is. Rain gardens can be really any shape. You want to locate and position your rain garden anywhere there is a path of flowing rainwater so that we can help that guide that water and get it to the areas of the soil where we really want it to soak in. Okay, so that's where I was saying along like a hedgerow, an area where there's plants. So we really want to get that water. It's kind of, you can kind of think about it like how we would irrigate our plants, but we're doing it with the rainwater and guiding that rainwater, directing it to where we want it to the plants that we want to get watered more deeply. Rain gardens can be placed next to walkways or driveways, directing that water away from those surfaces. The rain garden in this photo may technically be considered a swale, which is, like I said, a way of redirecting water flow within the landscape. But just like a rain garden, a swale receives water runoff, redirecting it, slowing it, spreading it, and sinking it. It's a good idea to include rocks, especially at the entrance, so that it can help um, siphon or filter out sediments or debris, but also it will prevent erosion. Okay, those rocks are really going to help lock in that edge and prevent that erosion, which is really important. We see rain gardens in the urban environment now more often than ever. I just love it. Um, this is the process of capturing that stormwater in these curb cutouts so that the stormwater can flow into the garden areas rather than into the storm drains. By integrating these bioretention gardens, contaminants from the sidewalks and the streets, the roads, and sediment are removed from the storm water runoff by filtering through these planted areas. It's so cool, and they look really beautiful too. Good location for a rain garden would be at least 10 feet away from a home or other structures and about 3 feet from a sidewalk, maybe 5 feet from a property line. We just really want to make sure that the water is, we want it to flow in a way that is going to benefit the plants and the root zones deep down, but not be a problem for any structures. Okay. We always want to grade that landscape ever so slightly away from the house or other structures so the water can flow away from those structures. Rain gardens are relatively flat, as I mentioned. They're not going to be deep as a pond or a bowl. They're really very shallow, just, maybe 6 or 8 inches. Um, it's just going to, again, what we want to do is find an area where we can really let the water spread out and then sink in. And if we want to check and see what area of our garden might be a nice place, if we have a place in mind, we start by just digging a hole and filling it up with water and then watching how fast does that water drain. If it drains in less than 24 hours, then that's a perfect spot. And then how large should the rain garden be? A general recommendation for a garden is approximately 4% of the contributing impervious surface area. Okay, more math. So your soil type will affect how the rain garden should be sized. So due to the infiltration rate of that soil. So I'm talking about those of us that have clay soil that isn't draining as fast or that water doesn't infiltrate as easily as like sandy soil, right? So we're going to always start, or what we're going to create is a very shallow uh, rain garden, a basin that's about 6 inches deep. And then we want to consider how much water we're able to capture from the roof or from overflow. The minimum size of our garden is going to be 4% of the square footage of that roof. So in our example here, if the runoff area, if that section of roof is 20 feet by 25 feet, this is 500 square feet. 4% of 500 square feet is 20 square feet. So the minimum size of that rain garden for this person will be 20 square feet. So not a very large area. So that 20 square feet is going to be able to really take on quite a bit of water. The maximum, we want, we can do 4% as the minimum, but then we'll look at up to 10% as the maximum. So let's have a closer look at this illustration again. So rain gardens are just going to be about 6 or 8 inches deep. However, if the soil is less porous and more clay-like, then we might want to make it a little shallower and perhaps a little wider. So we might look at instead of 6 to 8 inches deep, we might be looking at 3 to 5 inches deep. But then we're going to bring out the width of that. Or we might consider dividing it up into like maybe 3 smaller rain gardens or so forth. Um, Again, we want to, we're not building it like a pond. And then we also want to make sure that we're not going to build it over any utility lines like the gas line or electrical lines. And then again, if we have an idea, if we have an area of the garden in mind, it's like I've got the perfect spot for it that's going to take the overflow from that rain catchment system I just installed. But we want to make sure we're going to first just dig out that area, and depending on the type of soil, we're going that will dictate the size as well. Remember that if it's not draining as well, or if it that if it's more clay-like, we might need to make it a little broader. And then uh, we're going to dig out the soil in this once we have a space and an area in mind, and we're ready to create our rain barrel. We're going to dig out the soil down to about that 6 inches or so, and we're going to use the soil that we dug out to create the berm around the edge. That's going to be our edge, and we are going to uh, then we're going to get some rocks or some cobble, especially at the entrance where the water is flowing in. All right, so that's going to be set up to kind of anchor the entrance of the flow coming into that garden. Then we're going to take our garden fork or shovel. I like working with a fork. It just seems to be a little easier in my opinion. And then we're going to go through and we're going to loosen the bottom of that soil about 12 inches down. And that's why the fork is easier, because you could just kind of step on it, sink it down and wiggle it a little bit, lift it up, sink it down, wiggle a little bit and lift it up. Now we have 12 inches of soil at the bottom of the rain garden that's kind of loose. We are going to put 4 to 6 inches of compost on top of that, and then we're just going to lightly incorporate that compost into the top like 4 or 6 inches of that soil we just loosened up. Now we've conditioned that soil. Now we are ready to go. And, we've got our rocks kind of or gravel packed around the entry so that the water can flow in with ease without eroding the edges. The types of plants that we want to select for a rain garden. Well, the plants, this is the fun part. First, we want to consider how much sun. Of course, the more sun, the better, okay, because we really want those areas to dry out. We also want to pick plant material that will thrive in the sun, or if it's a part sun, part shade, we want to make sure we've got plant material that's going to thrive with that sun exposure. Um, we are going to, as I mentioned before, choose native flowering perennials and clump grasses and shrubs. California natives are the best as far as I'm concerned because they adapt to our summer dry climate, can take the winter rains, and of course support our local habitat. Um, I love the California natives like the yarrow, the Pacific Coast irises, the California poppies. I mean, there's just so many beautiful ones. There's really just anything that really kind of fits your plant palette, your color palette. But the cool thing is when we're planting these plants either by 4-inch pots or 1-gallon pots, until they grow in, there's a lot of space. So I like to broadcast the native seeds like the California poppy seeds in between so they can kind of fill in and outcompete any weeds that are growing while my other plants are becoming more established. And then the last note is going to be on maintenance, maintaining our garden. So there's a couple things I'd like to share with you to consider. The two real big takeaways is that you want to keep your rain garden working and you want to keep it looking good. So number one is we want to watch out for those weeds, as I just mentioned. They will want to take over. You've just amended this soil, you've got this beautiful space. Weeds are opportunists and they will try to take over. And it might seem really overwhelming at first, but really we want to kind of go through and hand pull those weeds or get a weeding tool and remove them at first sight. The younger we can get them, the easier it's going to be in the long run. Because then once those plants start to grow, they're going to outcompete the weeds and the weeds will not be as much of an issue. The next thing is that we want to make sure that our our rain garden is working. So, in some cases, after a rain event, soil or mulch will move in and settle, and it could settle around the crown of the plants. So we want to make sure we've gone in and we've uh, replaced any mulch that is moved. We get it back into place. We want to make sure we've removed any mulch that might be around the crown of a plant or maybe has buried a stem. We want to make sure none of the plant parts are going to be buried by the mulch because they can actually rot. And then we want to make sure we've removed any debris that might be around the entrance or the base of the plants, any litter, things like that. So we just want to make sure that the garden is going to be functioning. And if there's any areas that may be eroded after a rain event, we just want to make sure that we've replaced any rocks, or maybe we have to look at the design again to see if we need to do any improvements. And we absolutely want to make sure there is going to be no standing water after 3 days. That's really important. And if there is, then we might have to, you know, improve the design a little bit. Okay, so anyway, hopefully you've been inspired by rain gardens. I think they're really neat and they're fun and they're just a really great way to keep a lot of water on site by benefiting our plants and the local wildlife and habitat. Okay, the last few minutes, I just want to introduce you to some other concepts, which is increasing our pervious surfaces. So when we think about hardscaping around our homes and landscapes, we might think of like driveways or patios, walkways, and oftentimes they're made of concrete or mortared in flagstone or brick. Um, but these materials are impervious and prevent water from soaking in the ground and ultimately contribute to a little bit more runoff and flooding. So we can consider how can we work with maybe the pervious surfaces like pervious pavement or gravel or dry laid pavers, dry laid flagstone that allow that water to flow through it and to sink into the ground much deeper, recharging that soil below and benefiting the root zones of the plants in the area and not running off. There's many different types of permeable materials on the market these days. The concept is that the water, or in this case, stormwater from the rain or overflow from the roof or a rain catchment system, wants to get absorbed into the soil and not run off pavement. So these surfaces can be made of several layers of permeable stones or asphalt, or a simple layer of gravel, depending on the application or use. For an area that might have heavy vehicles or machinery, or like RV parking, you might want to consider pervious pavement that will require a contractor or an engineer to design and install it, but then can hold the weight of those heavier vehicles. But for our gardens, and walkways, gravel, decomposed granite that has not been uh, embedded with the stabilizing agent that makes it more or less pervious. Um, Bricks that are dry laid, in like sand or something similar like gravel or anything that is going to allow like the water to move through is going to be ideal. I think it also looks really nice. So again, the materials that we use are going to depend on how we intend to use the space. So like the difference between the walkways, the patios, the driveways. Um, some materials for large jobs may require a permit, as I mentioned, and hiring a contractor will be highly recommended. So, some of the resources that I have to share for, of course, pest management, we have Our Water, Our World that you can resource. You can access the fact sheets as a pest management resource for you for some common pests around the home and garden. And for more in-depth pest management, we have the UC statewide IPM program that we partner with. If you haven't been to their website, I encourage you and I invite you to check it out. It's just an incredible searchable database that can get you the answer to just about any pest problem you might be faced with. And then in regards to rebates, I would recommend going to the Sonoma Marin Water Saving Partnership. Um, their website, I know that's on the resource page, is going to be really helpful. It's going to have a lot of great resources about water conservation, rebates, and different programs throughout the county. And then there was one more resource I was going to share. Oh yeah, Daily Acts. Daily Acts in Petaluma will also have some really great resources and information for you. And so I'd like to thank you all for joining me.